Among the Mets' top prospects, who is the best bet to be the center fielder of the future? I'll talk about that and much more with prospect analyst Aram Leighton on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor and where I work with Aram Leighton, who is joining me on the show today to talk about some of the Mets' top prospects. Aram dives deeper into prospects than anyone I know. This is what he does, and he gives us great insight today on some of the top prospects in the Mets system. Hang around for the absolute end of the show, where I will still give you a brief preview of the Mets' upcoming series with the A's, the Sacramento A's. We'll talk about that to close the show. But first, prospect talk. It's a Friday farm report, so I got Aram Leighton on the show to talk some Mets prospects. Aram just recently did his top 100 update going into the season and also his top 15 Mets prospects. And I'll tell you, if you want a deep dive into the top of the Mets farm system, Aram and Jack on the call-up did, about an hour and a half on the top 15? So I'm going to throw that episode in the link for the show today for people who really want to dive deep into the Mets farm system. Today, Aram, I want to focus on a couple of separate questions I have about the Mets. And the first one I want to pose to you is about center field. So the way I see the New York Mets right now, you got a couple of options who are coming up the ranks in center field. You got Jett Williams, who could be up the middle in the infield, or it could play center. You have Drew Gilbert as a more of an honorable mention. And then further down the line, you have Nick Morabito and Carson Benge. So my question to you is, it's 2028, and I want to imagine an opening day center fielder for the New York Mets that's above average on both sides. Who is the best bet to be the center fielder of the future for the New York Mets if you had to pick one of their prospects right now?
It's probably the lowest hanging fruit because he was just taken in the first round, but I really do think it's Carson Benge. And it's also because I really believe in the glove out there as well. And it's interesting because he didn't get a chance to play as much up the middle as I think he should have. And I think what we saw, even he was a two-way player. So I don't think they wanted to run him into the ground playing center field at Oklahoma State, then also pitching. It's so much more tiring moving back and forth out there, but it wasn't because he's incapable. He glides out there, even though he's not a plus runner, he runs well, but his routes are efficient. He has great instincts out there. You look at the offensive profile too. I think it's really easy to buy into that. But I do really feel like he can be at least an average defender in center field, which if he's giving you potentially above average power, at least average power, good bat to ball, getting on base at a good clip, it's just a really solid everyday player up the middle. I don't know what the plan is with Jett, but they're playing him back in the infield again. So I just feel like Benge has an easier path to get there and just settle in as he's already showing some good things up the middle.
So with Carson Benge, I mean, I was happy to see they started him right in high A. They didn't even waste the time putting him in St. Lucie to start the season, where I think he would have just dominated for 2 weeks and they would have called him up anyway. What do you think about just playing in Brooklyn, though? Like, you think that might hold him back the way it did Ryan Clifford last year?
It was funny. I was talking about that with somebody yesterday. We talk about park factors. I think that might be the most underrated park factor in minor league baseball. And I know Mets fans, it's well documented, but it is until you go out there and you see the wind whistling off of Coney Island, especially off of right field, and you watch a fly ball hit hard that barely feels like it gets out of the infield. It's like, geez. But I don't know if it's something that affects a guy like Benge as much because he slaps the ball over the yard so well. And he's not a guy that's going to be so dependent on pull side pop. Whereas you look at like Clifford, he's hitting bombs to the pull side, and that's what he's trying to sell out for a lot of times. It's a 3 true outcome profile. That's great. That's fine for who he is. I mean, I watched Benge slap one the other way down the line. And I think it was I always want to say the Futures game, but spring breakout. he's got the ability to spray it all over. It's more line drives and gap to gap. It may hold him back a little bit, but I think it's just going to more so have him leaning into the hit tool, which I think could be above average and a really good approach. But I could see the Mets being comfortable moving him out of there kind of quickly just to challenge him at Double-A.
Yeah, I think, that's the crazy thing about a hitter like Benge is how quickly he could progress through the system where, I mentioned 2028. It could be at some point in 2026 where we could see him. And that's where this whole conversation is interesting to me is, does somebody grab center field before then? And I think Jett Williams is like the really complicated part of this question. That's why I want to kind of talk about him at the end and then bridge that into the next thing I want to ask you about second base. But in the middle, Nick Morabito. To me, I think it's as safe of a fourth outfielder profile as you can find. I was noting, and I was excited to hear that you were kind of thinking the same thing when you were talking about him on your show at the call up, but mentioning how lower levels, Nick Morabito being able to just, put bat on ball and get hits. And so now I'm wondering, you get him up into Double-A. Infields are getting better. Pitchers are getting better. Do you think that the hit tool has the staying power to potentially be a regular in the big leagues, or are you still more leaning fourth outfielder with Nick Morabito?
It's a great question because you look at a guy that can motor and put the ball on the ground at about a 56% clip. The thing that's interesting with him is he hits the ball a little bit harder than you may expect. And so that's where I'm like, okay, it is a flat swing that results in higher contact rates, but maybe he can make an adjustment to get the ball in the air a little bit more, some more line drives, and that can help him, I think in the BABIP department and just consistently hit better because you're not going to sustain a 390 batting average on balls in play against better infields and better defenses and just better teams in general. I think there's a chance. And that's why, like, in what is a good, solid Mets system, he ranked 11 for us. And I put a 45 future value, which a lot of times, like, that's fourth outfielder, but that's a guy that's like could be right there. Like maybe for a second division team, he's an everyday center fielder. So I think he's right on that edge. And if he can find a little bit more loft in that swing without compromising the bat to ball, I do think he could be there because the defense is good. He's a 70 runner and the approach, that's the big thing too. He doesn't chase. So that helps a lot as well. I think for a team like the Mets, that's perpetually going to be a World Series contender. He's, or at least, a contender to win the division. Probably not the guy that you're sharpieing in center field, but he strikes me more as like a second division regular. So could be a really good fourth outfield option for the Mets, though.
Yeah, I think the exciting thing about him is just that speed gives you a tool to get excited about. Like a Drew Gilbert, could he, if he maxes out everything, could he be a starting center fielder? Maybe, but more it feels like, okay, he could be like a nice fourth outfielder that runs into some homers, but doesn't have anything that really pops and is exciting. Like Nick Morabito could steal 60 bases this year in Double-A, and we wouldn't really blink. Like that's the one thing that he has. If he can get on base, at least he can generate some runs that way.
I love that you bring that up because a big part of it is like, okay, if this doesn't go the way that we think it can, what's the fallback, right? If the hit tool doesn't progress how we think it's going to be, or the power doesn't progress, it's different for every player, right? But with the Drew Gilbert, you can't really play that game because you kind of need everything to work out. It needs to be the 50 grade tools across the board for him to be that everyday player with more, or at least fill a role. I think with Morabito, like, yeah, you could say, okay, well, maybe the power stalls out and the hit tool's stuck at 50, but with his wheels and his defense and his approach, that's a guy that you can feel really confident, at least like filling a Tyrone Taylor type of role and giving you some value. And clearly the Mets value those types of players. It looks different. Sometimes it looks like Jose Siri. Sometimes it looks like Tyrone Taylor. But that fourth outfielder speed defense, that's a very important role that I think Stearns is clearly valued even back to his days in Milwaukee, where they've had similar types of players always filling in there. So I think that's the thing with him and why he actually ended up being ranked a little bit higher than a Drew Gilbert is that, or excuse me, not higher than Drew Gilbert, but right close to him, which I think the gap used to be much more significant, is that he's got different fallback plans to still fill a big league role. Whereas for Gilbert, it feels like everything's got to kind of work across the board. Maybe the ceiling's a little bit higher, but it's harder to figure out what role he would fill if it doesn't all work out.
Yeah, I think you made a really interesting point there about David Stearns too and what he values because if you're looking at the league and if you look at our top 10 center fielder rankings for a couple of years the Mets are right near the top of that list because you had Brandon Nimmo who gave you a well above average bat at that center field position, but the defense was league average at best. David Stearns comes in, they stick him in left field. Now that Nimmo's had the plantar fasciitis, the knee, I don't think we're ever going to see him in center field again. But it's clear that he always values having that glove first in the outfield. The question is, can the Mets develop a player that can have that glove and the bat? I want to talk about Jett Williams in just a minute because I think there's a chance that he gets there, but also he could be the guy at second base. So we're going to go through what Jett Williams brings to the table in just a minute. First, though, a quick break. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site that's made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros who are looking for that extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. All right, so Jett Williams, if the Mets have a prospect in this farm system that can come up and make an impact in center field this year, it might be Jett. What have you seen from the limited time he has played center field? It's been probably more 70-30 in the dirt, I would say, throughout his minor league career. They did say that they wanted to have him in center field more this year, but I don't know if that's 50-50 split or if they're going to maybe turn that the other way and have it more in center field just because they see that path where he could replace a Tyrone Taylor or Jose Siri this season. But what have you seen about just the ability for him to maybe actually hang in center field as a small guy to be an outfielder anyway?
Yeah, it's a lot of reliance on athleticism at this point, but I think he looks capable and looks comfortable tracking balls out there. It's just getting the reps and being hurt and not being available, of course, makes it difficult as well. But when I was able to see him in the fall league, which fall league's a really tough place to evaluate outfielders because you'd be floored at how many fly balls drop out there. One, because the ball carries to the sun is just insane. And so sometimes like really good outfielders are even misplaying balls, but he looked comfortable in terms of like relatively comparing him to guys that have not had a ton of reps out there. I think he has the ability to cover enough ground where, a lot of guys generally like Benge, even like he has those long strides. So even though he's not as fast as Jett Williams home to first wise, feels like he can kind of cruise and eat up ground more. Whereas for a Jett Williams to cover that ground, it's a lot more choppier steps. The eyes kind of move a little bit more and it's a little bit more difficult to track the ball, but he's so fast that I even think him and his cruising speed can be smoother and cover that ground. And that's what I saw from him. Because you think about it, the harder you're running, the harder you're picking them up and putting them down, those eyes are going to move. And that's where guys, I think, kind of are challenged to be able to track the ball the same way. I think he can do it, but he's also going through the process of like trying to develop as a shortstop as well. It's not like he's the best defender there either. So it's just a lot on his plate. And I do wonder if they like want to have him develop more in center field, maybe moving him to second base a little bit more, things like that. I feel like it's a lot to have him learn two premium positions at the same time when he's still working to be average at either.
I think part of the issue is you just don't know how you're going to need to use Jett Williams because if the Mets decide they need an ace at the deadline, Jett Williams might, come up high on people's lists, and he's more valuable if he's still showing he can play shortstop. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you're thinking about his Alec, with the Mets and Francisco Lindor still having 7 years on his deal. There is no world where he's ever going to be the starting shortstop of the Mets, so it might make more sense to have him play second, play center. Also, you have to juggle having Morabito at the same level right now, so you don't want to, have Morabito just always playing in a corner and not playing some center field as well. So it is a tough juggle the Mets have trying to figure out where to slot all these guys in. What I will say is the center field position right now in Major League Baseball is probably the weakest, I think, when it comes to finding a bat that can play center. Like, I think there's more catchers that can hit now than center fielders all of a sudden.
Which is crazy.
It's been a wild development the last, I don't know, maybe 3 years where we've seen just so many catchers come up that can actually hit. So, to me, I would just value trying to find the answer. So, personally, I look at Jett Williams compared to Nick Morabito, and I just think that there's a much better chance with the bat, right? That Jett Williams is going to be able to be an above average regular in the big leagues. So I would be playing Jett a lot in center field, and we'll see what they ultimately do.
And just like I'm just queuing up even more video now. Just there's a couple of things I wanted to like key in on too, with like the jumps, and like he sees the ball well, and you know that in the plate too. Like clearly he's got a good set of eyes, but the jumps are good too. So like if you have that closing speed and your jumps are good, like Corbin Carroll's routes are not great, and his jumps are honestly not even very good, but he's so fast that he's able to grade out as a fine defender in center field and a really good one in a corner. Like Jett's jumps are already pretty good. Like I think it's at a point where if he gets enough reps out there, he can develop. He doesn't need to be a plus defender. He just needs to be average because, as you mentioned, the bat is most likely going to play. On the offensive side, I want to see him, show that he can match those contact rates at the upper levels. But it's so hard to dive deep into that data when he's dealt with so many different issues that would very directly affect your ability to make consistent contact. Was it a wrist as well? Like he's had several different ailments where it's hard to really put a ton of value into that. And we've seen him have a good feel for the barrel. There's clearly some ability to pull the ball in the air that defies his frame. And the approach is always going to be elite. So that's why I feel like he has a great chance of being able to develop into a solid bat. But I also was thinking about like a Chris Taylor type of role for him as well, where like he could just be this speed demon and valuable piece that can move all over the diamond if they wanted to go about it that way too, and kind of cater to your team's needs each year. That's
where I feel like the Mets are an interesting spot because they have Jett, and then they have another guy I want to get into now as we talk about second base with Luis Angel Acuna. Acuna is another guy that I see like the role that he's playing right now is a one that I ultimately thought he would settle into. But my question with Acuna is, he could be a bench piece that can play some center, be your backup shortstop, which you might not need a much there with Lindor, but it's still nice to have one on the roster if you want to DH Lindor a day. Have him play second, have him play third, have him play all over. Right now, though, when I'm watching him take at bats, there's just not a great approach in the box. He's just very swing happy. It feels like he either has to tell himself to be patient and then he might miss some pitches to hit, or he's just falling back into his natural, I'm going to swing at everything. So the issue the Mets are in right now is I feel like this is a guy that still needs to be in AAA, but their roster kind of needs Acuna on it right now because he's going to pair best with Jeff McNeil when he comes back off of injury.
You can't really replicate that defensive value and speed too. Like it's not just that he can plug in around there. And I don't know how he's graded out just yet at the big league level, but I know what he's capable of just having watched him and evaluated him as, shortstop, and then seen him play some center and seen him play second, even dating back to the Rangers system. Like this guy can pick it. And there's not a lot of players that you can plug in at shortstop or second, or even fill in the outfield and be that comfortable. But yeah, like it's easy to forget because of that fever dream stretch he had at the big league level that it was not good in AAA. No. That's not to say he's not a good player, but that was an adjustment period for him. And then he gets thrown into the fire and he gets hot. And I think that was a reminder of the talent that he has, right? He's got great hands. Talk about another guy that can outslug his frame a little bit too. Like he'll run into some baseballs, but he's always been aggressive. And that's something that needs to be rectified because now, I mean, big league pitchers, they know the deal and they're going to let him get himself out. And that's what he's been doing. He's been giving away ABs, but the feel for the barrel is good. He's got above average hit tool in terms of the bat to ball skills. There's enough impact there. Like, again, it's pretty surprising when you look at how hard he can hit the ball for his size. There's a lot of things to like, but when you're expanding like that and you're putting the ball on the ground, you're not going to be able to be in the lineup every single day. But that said, even with the slow start he's had offensively, I think he's good enough offensively to fill that bench role. But to your point, then how do you develop him? Like this is a 23-year-old. He's gonna be 23 for the entirety of the season. And he could be an everyday big leaguer, but he needs to get the opportunity to develop to do that. And that would presumably be in AAA, but the team needs him as well. And this is a team that has World Series aspirations, I assume. So that's the challenge.
Did you see the quotes from Lindor about Acuna during spring training?
No.
So he basically said Acuna looks bored in spring training. He basically said that when he gets under the bright lights, he'll perform. He had a quote there, said he could be a 10-time All-Star, which I thought was a little bit steep of praise to put on him. But he said that he looks bored, and he even said, the quote in the story said he acts like he don't care. Like that was, and this is him fighting for a job in spring training. So to me, I don't know, that kind of came off, really odd to me that Acuna was being viewed in that light. But then again, it's like he makes the most sense for this roster. So it's really a weird dichotomy where I feel like he should be in AAA, but
that could explain though why he wasn't maybe as dialed in as he should be in Syracuse, New York.
That was what they were saying. They were trying to equate it like that the reason why his numbers were bad in AAA and the reason why he didn't have a great spring is because he needs like the adrenaline. But at the same time, it's like, can't you manufacture some adrenaline to get up to the show? Like, isn't that something to push for? So I don't know, that was off-putting to me for sure.
Yeah, I don't love that. And I remember there was like a similar conversation around, Mauricio, where it's like he's kind of going stale in AAA and things like that. And I get it, but Mauricio was also kind of stuck there a little bit longer, where I was like, Acuna, like that was your first year there, man. Like you should be excited. You get an opportunity, and I get it. Like the lights can bring a little bit more out of you, but I also think like that's how it goes when you're an aggressive hitter. There's going to be stretches where pitchers make more mistakes and you're swinging a lot, you're barreling them. And then there's going to be stretches where they're executing well and you're going to get yourself out a lot. And that's what's going on right now. So like you need to have a little bit more control over your outcomes as a hitter, because it's already so hard to do that professionally, especially at the major league level. And it does seem like the mental side is that last layer. And maybe that is why he should stay there. Like being mentored by a Lindor and some of these other guys, like in a Soto, maybe that can help him, but it is a weird development track for him.
Can you develop if ultimately the Mets decide they're going to bring, when Jeff McNeil comes up, they're going to send Beatty down. And I do want to ask you about Brett Beatty in a second, because good God, it's been a rough start to the season, but can Acuna, if he's playing, if he's getting, a start a week against a left-hander, and then he's, coming in off the bench. I mean, the only thing that might make sense to me if they really wanted to keep him up, is if they stole a start for him in center field too, just to get his bat in the lineup a little bit more. Like, I don't feel like, you're obviously not giving up much offensively with Tyrone Taylor and Jose Siri. You can put him in there at the end of the game if you want to, but I just wonder, like, can you get him enough at bats where it makes sense for him, like regardless of the team, for him developmentally? Does it make any sense to keep him down or keep him up?
No, I really don't think so. Unless if you're accepting that he might just, stall out in that role and that's the priority right now, I get it. But I don't know if they need to necessarily do that. Like you could go out and acquire, like go get a Kyle Farmer or something. I don't know. But like, I think for a guy that puts the ball on the ground that much, that's the big thing. Like that comes with more control of your lower half and just some slight mechanical inefficiencies can result in that higher ground ball rate, as well as chase being high. He just needs ABs. So I to that point, like I think he should be playing every day in AAA, and hell, get him more reps in center too. Like get him to a point where he's getting even more comfortable there. And then you can find more ABs when you bring him back up. But I think he should be playing every day in AAA. He's 23 and he has a chance to be an above average regular still. I wouldn't rule that out. But it's going to be hard to get there if you're not playing much.
Which leads us to Brett Beatty. I want to ask you about a former top 30 prospect in baseball, according to Just Baseball, that just has not figured it out. We'll talk about him in just a minute. All right, so I'll tell you, Aram, I'll make you feel a little bit better about having Brett Beatty as a top 30 prospect, because 3 weeks ago I was doing my bold prediction show and I was so bought in on what I saw from Brett Beatty in spring. I predicted that he would be second on the Mets when it comes to infielder WAR this season. I believed, just because I was like, well, Vientos and Alonso aren't going to rack up much WAR with their gloves. I'm like, hey, maybe Beatty is going to be the guy this year. And I legitimately think there is a world where Brett Beatty gets sent down when Jeff McNeil comes up, and we might not ever see him in the big leagues in a Mets uniform again, because this is a guy that's sort of screaming change of scenery. To me, it just seems so mental with Brett Beatty, because I mean, you watched him in spring training, and I get the pitching wasn't as good, but like the way he was controlling at bats, it's in there. But something about regular season baseball, and he's just a different guy. It seems like the bat's lagging. I just don't know what's going on.
It definitely seems like there's a mental component to it. I also think like you look at spring training, I'm looking at the numbers right now. He capitalizes, right? So like he against four seamers, this isn't a huge sample size. We're working with 86 plate appearances here. But against four seamers, pulverizing them, like absolutely pulverizing them. So actually, this is including let me just go spring training, excuse me. Just spring training, he hit over 400 against four seamers. So like, if you're sitting fastball and you're crushing fastballs, like you're going to put up good numbers in spring training. What I'm starting to just see more and more now is he can't recognize spin very well. And it just looks like he's sped up. And maybe that was the part that I underestimated. Like when I was looking at him as a player, like the chase rates were never crazy, but it just seems like he really struggles to recognize that spin. And you see those wave, like half-hearted swings at pitches in the dirt. And when he's not getting that fastball over the middle, like it just seems like he's sped up and uncomfortable. I know he's got longer levers, and that can make it more challenging to time things up for hitters. But I think that's probably been the biggest shock to me. Is just it looks like a different game though. At the same time, like I get you can feast on fastballs, but you mentioned he controlled his ABs a little bit better. Here it looks like everybody's throwing 5 miles per hour harder than they were in spring training, and it just seems like it seems like the mound moved up 10 feet for him. It just seems like it's so quick for him, and I don't know how that happens. And that's where I do think part of it is mental. But there seems to be a serious spin recognition problem.
Yeah, it's so baffling. Again, I mean, you're right. It does look like the mound has moved up. He is behind on every fastball. That's the thing that surprised me, is that all of a sudden it's like he can't catch up. And it just, I get not identifying spin. I get, tougher pitching during the regular season. You're going to see in spring training. I didn't expect him to OPS over 1,000 in the season, but I thought, all right, well, he's at least going to get his on those fastballs, and we haven't seen it. And the crazy thing is, I mean, he did carry, I think, some of his struggles, at the plate to the field, because he did make an error the other day. But I've been very surprised at how good he's even looked at second base. Like he's looked like a passable second baseman, and he picked up the position 6 months ago. But at the same time, like it's getting to the point where you can't even stomach having him on your bench. I don't think, the way he's hitting.
And no, and he looks like it's 2 strikes every time he gets up there. And it's really hard to watch. I want to see him succeed for his sake. And I can't imagine just the mental hurdles of it and getting booed, and after every AB. But whatever, it is crazy to see how after pulverizing fastballs in spring training, how they've just overwhelmed him here. And then when that happens, when you're late on the heater and you think, okay, well then I gotta get this thing going earlier. And then you get a slider, you're on that front foot. And that's the interesting thing. I'm looking at like contact points here. His average contact points for fastballs, even in spring training, was really deep. And then on breaking balls is pretty far forward. So it's like, it seems like he's almost committing to one or the other before he even gets it. And if you're committing to fastballs in spring training, like you're going to do all right. But still, it feels like even when he's committing to these fastballs, they're getting on him quick. So he needs a change of scenery. He probably needs a new set of eyes on him, and maybe to try to scrap some things and reinvent. But it seems like it's just definitely not going to happen in New York.
And it's also one of those situations where there's at this point, even sending him to AAA, if he hits 400, like that's not going to do anything for the Mets. And that's not going to do anything for a team that's looking at him at the deadline either. Like the big league sample has grown to the point where I think he is the classic, like, if the Mets swung a big trade for an ace at the deadline, he's like the third or fourth piece in that deal. It's just, all right, we got at bats at third base that we could take a flyer on Beatty, but I don't think he's moving the needle in it. Like I see Mets fans say, trade him for a starting pitcher. I'm like, yeah, he might be in the trade, but you're not trading Brett Beatty for anything at this point, unfortunately.
No, because it's also the optics of, like, you have to think about the other front office. If I'm a general manager, like how bad it would look optically. I understand what Beatty's capable of and what he's shown in the minor leagues, but if you trade for a guy who's been getting blown up in the minor leagues or in the major leagues, excuse me, and then that trade doesn't go great for you, and he's not like a tertiary piece, you're gonna get ripped to shreds. And that's why, I mean, teams will be more than happy to take him on with the upside as a tertiary piece, but or a 1-for-1 flip of like a reliever, like a 6th or 7th inning guy, maybe. But yeah, I've seen him floated in some trades and stuff like that. And unless he's that third piece, I don't see why he would be able to get anybody anything significant.
So then that brings our conversation full circle. I kind of feel like the best course of action for the Mets, most likely, unless in the 2 weeks before Jeff McNeil comes back, Brett Beatty shows us a different version of himself. I imagine Beatty goes down. I think they probably stick with Acuna. Hope that Ronnie Mauricio gets healthy and could maybe be the guy that could replace Acuna at some point. Maybe Acuna can develop at the big leagues. But then it leads me to, at end of the season this year, do you think there's a better chance that Jett Williams might make an impact at second base than center field? Like, could you see that? Because to me, it's like if Jett just played second base, I don't think there's any questions defensively. I think that's probably like the most logical home for him on this Mets roster long term. Just seeing Jett and Lindor up the middle, I think that would be potentially what ends up happening here.
I wouldn't rule it out because, like, if that guy's your 9 hitter, and look, he might strike out a little bit as he's getting adjusted and whatever. He's going to see a lot of pitches. He's going to grind out ABs, get his free passes, and when he's on base, like, he's going to motor. I wouldn't rule that out at all. But it is one of those situations where it's like sometimes we forget like how big of a leap it is, and you look at a Luis Angel Acuna, and it's like, okay, well, Jett Williams is could be so much better, and he probably will. But is he better right now? Maybe not, as Luis Angel Acuna gets more, opportunity under his belt. So that's the only thing, is I just don't know if there's a rush to get there, and Jett's not on the 40, right? So it would also create a little bit more of a crunch there. It wouldn't shock me, but I also think that there's probably some desire. He's 21 still. He's been banged up, to like let this kid develop a little bit too, and maybe take his time.
Absolutely. And all of that just leads us to wonder as Mets fans, can Jeff McNeil have one more good year in him? Because I think that would help all these situations, that help all these prospects settle in. I want to have you on for one more segment here. So I think you're going to bleed into 2 shows for me, because I want to talk about some arms while I have you. So we'll get to that on tomorrow's show for those of you listening. Big thank you to Aram Leighton for joining me on the show today. Again, as you heard at the end of that conversation there's more discussion I had with Aram. I have a whole segment that'll be on one of our weekend episodes where we talked about some of the top pitching prospects in the Mets farm system. But I wanted to leave a little bit of time on what's already probably a pretty long show to talk about this upcoming series, Mets A's. Just give you the briefest of series previews. I'll be with you the whole weekend doing shows Saturday and Sunday as well. So we'll preview each individual game as it comes, but just to give you a little bit of an outlook on what's been going on with the A's. They're playing in Sacramento. That ballpark has been playing like a real hitter's ballpark. It's particularly short down the right field line, but really both lines. It's pretty easy to get the ball out of the yard, so expect a lot of home runs this weekend. The A's are 5-8 to start their season. They just played the Padres. They did take one game, which is pretty impressive considering how the Padres have started off the season. They did win one on Tuesday, 10-4, but they lost the other 2 games of the series, so they have not gotten off to the best start. Again, 5-8. They're at the bottom of the AL West. When it comes to pitching probables for this series, for Game 1, it's going to be Griffin Canning versus the left-hander J.P. Sears. J.P. Sears not going to strike out a lot of batters, but he has had a pretty good start to the season, 3.46 ERA through 2 starts. So he has allowed 5 runs. He's gone deep in both starts, actually, pitched into the 7th inning each time. Mets obviously will go with their right-handed lineup, Luis Angel Acuna, Starling Marte. That should be the expectation. Beyond that, there is not a listed starter on Saturday. They have just put one of their starters on the injured list. I think it's something Estes, if I'm not mistaken. David Peterson will be going up against a spot starter potentially, unless they want to move Luis Severino up, who could still be pitching on regular rest. We'll be talking about that a little bit more on tomorrow's show. If Sevy doesn't start on Saturday, it would be lined up for a Kodai Senga, Luis Severino matchup in what could be a rubber match on Sunday. Again, I'll be giving you updates about this series throughout the weekend. Also, if you want a little more of an in-depth series preview, I did go on Locked On Athletics or Locked On A's to discuss the series at length. He was asking me a lot of questions about the Mets, but we did get into the series throughout. So if you want to check out that episode, you can do that as well. Again, on tomorrow's show, I'll be recapping whatever we watched late tonight. Tonight's the one late game on this West Coast swing. You have a 10:05 start East Coast tonight. Then it's going to be day games out west in Sacramento. So 4:05 starts on Saturday and Sunday. But I'll be recapping game 1 of the series. I'll be previewing game 2. And then I'll have potentially that other segment with Aram talking pitching prospects. Thank you all for tuning into the show today. As always, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 13,000 subscribers. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.